I found a diagram with butterflies and flowers. I've printed it full size and I'm going to trace it out with Logic Trace 2022. First thing we're going to do here is we're going to select the 4 points, which is to define the diagram size. We'll select the 4 corners on the diagram. Shown here, I'm selecting the 4 corners of the diagram. The next thing we're going to do on the diagram here is we're going to trace out the full perimeter of the diagram, and I'm going to use the tracing command. For this kind of diagram with the ins and outs, the tracing command is perfect. This is a complex diagram. We just take our time and work our way through it and trace it all out. It really helps if the diagram is full size. It's about an 18-inch by 18-inch diagram, so it makes it easier to trace. But as you can see, the tracing coming along, it's pretty smooth. The perimeter of tracing has become quite a long trace, but it was doable. As you can see, it's coming along nicely. Good point to bring up here: if you do need to take a break, just take a red pencil and mark the spot where you stopped, and then just take your break and then continue on from that red mark. I always talk about saving your work frequently. And this program saves your work. It saves it twice. It saves the copy that you make, and it also saves a working copy. And what's nice about the working copy is that you could take a break, just for a coffee break or even a couple of days. So long as you've saved your work, you can continue right on from where you stopped tracing. In this case, the diagram is very detailed, so it might be in your favor to take a break. So just save your file, it'll create that working copy, reload that working copy, and just continue on from where you stopped. Mark that spot with a red pencil. As you can see here, as I'm coming along, the perimeter has been traced out. Now I'm starting to do some of the internal parts, and there's a lot of those parts, and I'll mark them off with a red pencil, and that way I know where I've started and I've known what part has been traced. Also, the red pencil technique, the marking where I start, it's important because when I come back around with the pen, I don't want to overtrace because that'll cause a cross vector. I try and do the best I can when I'm tracing, paying attention to detail, because it saves doing any node editing after the diagram has been saved. The program has a unique feature built into it that allows you to extend the display contents to another device, like a cell phone or an iPad. So in other words, you could extend the control window to an iPad or to a cell phone, keep that right close beside you as you're tracing, and you can make your selections right there instead of going back to the main screen like I'm using a desktop. So I have to go back to the main computer screen to select stop. I'm not using this feature because I would have to have a third camera on that small device that's showing my selections. This way I'm using a desktop computer and I'm recording that screen, and I'm using a camera on the diagram. My plan here is to create a DXF file that I'm going to load into the CO2 laser, and I'm going to use barn board paneling to cut this out. I find that butterflies look really fantastic with a barn board panel. Just a tidbit here about the Logitrace 2022. I find it easy to use and I find it fast. And it has the ability to be saved in a DXF format, PolyDXF, SVG, or PDF. The control window, that's the window on the left-hand side, has easy-to-use buttons, and you can switch between lines, arcs, curves, tracing, and circles. And it gives you very accurate patterns of what's being traced. There's an option and setup buttons that you can configure the program to suit the user. So like in my case there, under setup, I set up the line thickness to be 0.5. And I set up the color to be black. I like to have the display showing a real fine, thin, black line. Another worthwhile mention here is that Logitrace 2022 will work with any computer, PC and a Mac. That's interesting about the Mac. You can see there that my diagram is getting quite filled up with those red marks. That shows you how I can keep track of what's being traced. To cut down the length of the video, I've sped these next bunch of frames up to about 8 times. Getting close here to the end where I'll be finished the tracing, and I'll be able to save that file and load it into the CO2 software. It took a while to trace out this diagram because there's a lot of small internal parts that had to be traced out. And of course I save my work frequently. In case there's a problem, I can always go back using that working copy and retrace it. Okay, so this is it. I'm finished. I'm going to save the file now. I've loaded the final DXF file into the CO2 laser software, and I'm running it through the simulator to see the timing. I've got the barn board panel mounted on the laser, and I'm running the laser at low power and slow speed. It's very smooth cutting, but I am running about 45 psi air, which helps on the cutting, keeps it clean. You know you have the right setting when you see the cut and then the part sort of falls back a bit. Also in this case I didn't have to use any kind of magnetic hold downs. The panel was pretty flat and pretty straight. Turned out to be a good clean cut. The nice part about this cut is there's no finishing required. It's just a barn board panel, cut, and that's it. It's done.